The dark lore of Crow and Edgar. The first time Crow saw Edgar again, he tried to kill him. No warning, no questions, no hesitation. Edgar had just entered the arena when 3 poisoned blades cut through the air and buried themselves in the wall beside his head. The entire room went silent. Edgar slowly turned around, and there he was, standing above the entrance. Black feathers, a torn leather jacket, poison dripping from the blades between his claws. Crow. For several seconds, neither of them moved. They had not seen each other in years, but Crow still recognized him. The dark hair, the tired eyes, and that long scarf wrapped tightly around his neck. Edgar looked different now, older, colder. But Crow would never forget the face of the boy who once called him brother. And he would never forget the night that same boy threw him into a tank of poison and left him there to die. This is the dark story of Crow and Edgar, 2 boys raised together, 2 brothers created by Star Park, and one betrayal that transformed them into enemies. Long before they became brawlers, Crow and Edgar did not have those names. Inside the underground laboratories of Star Park, names were considered unnecessary. Names made subjects feel human, and Star Park did not want them to feel human. The scientists called Crow Subject 13. Edgar was Subject 14. They were kept inside a section of the laboratory known as the Black Wing. There were no windows, no clocks, no sunlight, only white walls, fluorescent lights, and cameras watching from every corner. Neither boy knew where he had come from. They did not remember having parents. They did not remember life outside the laboratory. Their earliest memories were of waking up inside separate glass rooms, hearing machines through the walls, and waiting for strangers in white coats to decide whether they were allowed to eat that day. Crow was older, only by a few years. But inside a place like the Black Wing, a few years could feel like an entire lifetime. He learned the laboratory's routines, which guards enjoyed hurting the subjects, which scientists could be manipulated, which cameras had blind spots. He learned how to hide food beneath his bed, how to pretend that an injury was worse than it really was, and how to remain completely still when the scientists entered the room. Edgar was different. He was angry, restless, always asking questions. Why are we here? What are they doing to us? Why can't we leave? Crow never had answers, so he gave Edgar something else: protection. Whenever Edgar refused an experiment, Crow distracted the guards. Whenever Edgar lost his food as punishment, Crow shared his own. When Edgar woke up screaming from nightmares, Crow sat against the wall between their rooms and spoke to him through a small ventilation grate. They could not see each other, but they could hear each other. Crow would tell him stories about the world outside, a world Crow had never actually seen. He described cities filled with lights, open skies, birds flying wherever they wanted. He described oceans, mountains, and streets so crowded that 2 children could disappear and never be found again. Edgar knew the stories were probably invented, but he listened anyway, because inside the Black Wing, hope did not need to be true. It only needed to keep you alive until morning. Over time, Subject 13 and Subject 14 stopped thinking of each other as strangers. They became brothers, not because they shared blood, but because they shared everything else: pain, fear, hunger, and the same impossible dream of escaping Star Park. The scientists noticed their connection. At first, they considered separating them. Then, they discovered something unusual. Whenever Crow believed Edgar was in danger, his physical performance increased. His reflexes became faster. His aggression became stronger. Edgar reacted the same way. When Crow was injured, Edgar became almost impossible to control. Their bond made them stronger. So, Star Park created a new experiment around it: Project Blood Brother. The purpose of the project was not to study friendship, it was to weaponize loyalty. The scientists wanted to know how far one subject could be pushed when the life of another person depended on them. They placed Crow and Edgar through increasingly dangerous tests. Sometimes they were forced to fight machines, sometimes they were locked inside freezing rooms and given only one protective suit. Sometimes food was placed between them, but there was only enough for one person. The scientists expected them to turn against each other. They never did. Crow always found a way to divide what they had. Edgar always refused to leave Crow behind. Even when the experiments became violent, they remained loyal. And that became a problem, because Star Park did not want brothers. It wanted weapons. Weapons were not supposed to care about each other. So the scientists designed one final test, a test that would destroy their bond permanently. One night, Crow woke to the sound of his door unlocking. A guard entered and dragged him from his room. Across the hallway, Edgar was already being restrained. Neither boy was told where they were going. They were taken deeper underground than ever before, past the medical rooms, past the security center, past a series of steel doors marked with hazard symbols. Finally, they entered a circular chamber. In the center was a metal platform surrounded by glass. Above it hung a tank filled with thick purple liquid. The liquid moved even though nothing was touching it. It climbed the inside of the glass like it was alive. Crow stared at it. Something inside him immediately understood that the substance was dangerous. Edgar looked towards the scientists. "What is that?" Nobody answered. A woman stepped forward. She was the director of Project Blood Brother. Her name was Dr. Voss. Crow hated her more than anyone else inside Star Park. She never raised her voice, never became angry, never showed emotion. She could order someone's death with the same calm expression she used while reading a report. Dr. Voss looked at the two boys and explained the final test. Only one subject would be allowed to leave the chamber. The other would die. At first, Edgar thought she was lying. Then the guards placed two weapons on the platform. Crow looked at Edgar. Edgar looked back at him. Dr. Voss continued speaking. The stronger subject will become Star Park's next elite brawler. The survivor would receive freedom, a new identity, a place inside the park. The loser would be disposed of. The glass doors closed around them. The guards stepped back. Crow picked up one of the weapons. Edgar stared at him. For one terrible second, Edgar believed Crow had chosen to fight. Then Crow turned and fired at the glass wall. The blast barely left a mark. Crow fired again. Nothing. He threw the weapon aside. "We're not doing this." Edgar looked towards the cameras. "They'll kill us both." "Then they kill us both." Crow stepped closer. "We leave together, or we don't leave." That was the promise they had made years earlier through the ventilation grate. No matter what Star Park did, neither brother would abandon the other. Edgar slowly placed his weapon on the floor. Dr. Voss watched from behind the glass. She did not look disappointed. She smiled, because their refusal was exactly what she had expected. Gas began entering the chamber. Crow covered his mouth. Edgar started coughing. A message appeared on the wall. "Combat must begin. Failure to comply will result in termination of both subjects." Crow searched for another exit. There was none. The gas became thicker. Edgar fell to one knee. Crow grabbed him and tried to hold him upright. "Stay awake." Edgar could barely breathe. Crow struck the glass with his fists until his hands began bleeding. The scientists watched. Nobody moved. Then Edgar noticed something. A reflection in the glass behind Dr. Voss. A computer screen. The screen contained medical data for both subjects. Most of it was impossible to read. But Edgar saw two sentences. Subject 13, compatible with Corvid toxin compound. Subject 14, fatal rejection expected. Edgar looked at the purple tank above them. Corvid toxin compound. Crow was subject 13. The poison would transform Crow, but if it entered Edgar's body, it would kill him. Then Edgar noticed another line. In event of mutual refusal, subject 14 will be terminated first. Edgar understood the truth. The test was never fair. Star Park had already chosen Crow. They wanted Edgar to die. His only purpose was to trigger Crow's transformation. Crow was still attacking the glass. He had not seen the screen. He did not know. And Edgar had only seconds to make a decision. He could tell Crow the truth. Crow would refuse to accept it. He would keep fighting until the gas killed them both. Or Edgar could do something unforgivable, something Crow would never understand. Edgar stood up. Crow turned towards him. "Are you okay?" Edgar picked up the weapon. Crow looked down at it. "Edgar, I'm sorry." Before Crow could move, Edgar attacked. The weapon struck Crow across the chest and threw him onto the platform. Crow stared up at him in disbelief. Edgar attacked again. Not hard enough to kill him, but hard enough to make it look real. Crow tried to defend himself. "What are you doing?" Edgar said nothing. He could not. If he explained, Crow would stop him. So Edgar continued attacking the only person who had ever protected him. The scientists watched with growing interest. The gas stopped. Dr. Voss moved closer to the glass. Crow's confusion became anger. He fought back. The two brothers crashed into the walls of the chamber. Years of loyalty disappeared beneath fists, blood, and panic. Crow begged Edgar to stop. Edgar refused. Finally, Crow knocked the weapon from Edgar's hand. He grabbed him by the collar. "You promised." Edgar looked into his brother's eyes. He wanted to tell him everything. He wanted to explain that Star Park had already decided who would die. He wanted to say that this was the only way. But Dr. Voss was watching. So Edgar said the one thing he knew Crow would believe. "I was never your brother." Crow froze, and in that moment, Edgar pushed him backwards. Crow fell against the controls beneath the purple tank. The glass above them opened. Thousands of liters of poison crashed down. Crow disappeared beneath it. His scream lasted only a few seconds. Then there was silence. Edgar stood at the edge of the platform, staring into the purple liquid. Crow did not come back up. The scientists entered the chamber. They placed a black scarf around Edgar's neck. At first, it appeared to be ordinary fabric. Then it tightened. The ends moved like living arms. Dr. Voss explained that the scarf was a control device. It would strengthen Edgar, protect him, monitor him, and if he ever revealed what had happened inside the chamber, and it would kill him. Edgar was given a new name, a new room, a place among Star Park's brawlers, but he was never given freedom. Every night, the scarf remained wrapped around his throat, a reminder that he had survived, and Crow had not. At least, that was what Edgar believed. Deep beneath the chamber, the purple compound entered a drainage system. Inside the darkness, Crow's body continued changing. His bones became lighter, his arms twisted into wings. Black feathers broke through his skin. The poison entered his blood, his claws, and his breath. The transformation should have destroyed his mind, but one memory kept him alive. Edgar's face. Edgar holding the weapon. Edgar saying, "I was never your brother." Crow survived because of hatred. For years, he moved through abandoned tunnels beneath Star Park. He learned how to control the poison. He stole clothing from security guards. He listened through ventilation systems. And eventually Subject 13 returned to the surface, but he no longer called himself Subject 13. He took the name printed on his old laboratory cage. Zero. Crow. He entered the Brawl Stars arena for one reason, to find Edgar. And when they finally stood face to face, Edgar did not defend himself. Crow threw the first dagger. It cut Edgar's shoulder. The poison entered his body. Edgar fell to one knee. Crow jumped from the platform and landed in front of him. "You look surprised." Edgar placed one hand over the wound. "I thought you were dead." "You hoped I was." "No." Crow struck him across the face. Edgar did not fight back. Other brawlers gathered at the edge of the arena, but nobody dared interfere. This was not an ordinary match. This was an execution. Crow raised another blade. Edgar looked up at him. "I did what I had to do." Crow's expression changed, only slightly, but Edgar saw it. "You threw me into that tank." "Yes, you left me." "Yes, you told me I was never your brother." Edgar's voice became quieter. "I needed you to believe me." The scarf around his neck suddenly tightened. Edgar stopped breathing. Crow noticed. The ends of the scarf wrapped around Edgar's arms, pulling him backwards. A warning. Do not speak. Edgar forced the words out anyway. "The poison was compatible with you." The scarf tightened again. Dark marks appeared across his throat. "It would have killed me, but it could save you." Crow stared at him. Edgar continued. "They were going to terminate me first. You would have tried to stop them. We both would have died." The scarf pulled harder. Edgar collapsed. Crow could have watched him die. For years, he had imagined this moment. He had imagined Edgar begging for forgiveness while the poison slowly stopped his heart. But now the truth was in front of him. Edgar had betrayed him. That part was real. He had attacked him, lied to him, thrown him into poison. But he had done it because he believed it was the only way to save them both. Crow cut the scarf. The blade barely damaged it. The living fabric struck him and threw him across the arena. Crow rose again. He launched himself into the air and released every poison dagger he had. The blades struck the scarf from every direction. The fabric screamed, not like cloth, like an animal. Edgar grabbed both ends and pulled. Crow landed beside him. Together, the brothers tore the scarf away from Edgar's throat. For one moment, it seemed they had succeeded. Then the scarf wrapped itself around Edgar again, tighter than before. A small Star Park symbol began glowing inside the fabric. Crow understood. The scarf was not only controlling Edgar, it was transmitting everything back to the laboratory. Dr. Voss knew Crow had survived, and now she knew the brothers had discovered the truth. Security alarms began sounding across the arena. Steel doors closed, red lights filled the room. Crow looked at Edgar. Years earlier, inside the final chamber, Crow had offered him a choice. They would leave together, or not at all. This time, Edgar reached out his hand. Crow looked at it. The poison inside his claws could kill Edgar within minutes. The scarf around Edgar's neck had been built by the people who destroyed Crow's life. Neither of them could ever return to who they had been. Too much had happened. Too much blood had been spilled. Too many years had passed. Crow did not forgive him. Not yet. Maybe he never would. But he took Edgar's hand. And when Star Park security entered the arena, the brothers were already gone. Some people believe Crow and Edgar became allies after that night. Others believe they continued fighting whenever the memories became too painful. Because knowing the reason for a betrayal does not erase it. Edgar saved Crow's life. But he also destroyed the person Crow used to be. Crow saved Edgar from the scarf, but part of him still wanted revenge. That is what made them blood brothers. Not love, not forgiveness. A bond created through pain. Two survivors connected by a decision neither of them could undo. And somewhere beneath Star Park, Dr. Voss reopened the files for Project Blood Brother. On her screen were two messages. Subject 13, active. Subject 14, control device compromised. Then a third message appeared. Final phase authorized. Because the fight between Crow and Edgar was never the end of the experiment. It was the result Star Park had been waiting for. Two brothers. Two weapons. One bond powerful enough to survive betrayal. And next time, Star Park would not ask them to fight each other. It would force them to destroy everyone else. That was dark. Like, genuinely dark. Because when you really think about it, Edgar did betray Crow. He attacked him. He lied to him. He pushed him into that poison. But at the same time, that betrayal might have been the only reason Crow survived. So was Edgar a villain? Or was he just a terrified kid making an impossible decision? Because personally, I do not know how Crow is supposed to forgive something like that, even after learning the truth. Imagine spending years believing that the only person you trusted tried to murder you. Imagine surviving inside those tunnels, slowly turning into something you no longer recognize, with only one memory keeping you alive. Your brother telling you that he never cared about you. Then years later, you finally find him, and discover that it was all a lie. Not because he hated you, but because he believed hatred was the only thing strong enough to keep you alive. That is complicated, and honestly, that is what makes Crow and Edgar such an interesting pair. They are not normal brothers. They cannot just hug, apologize, and suddenly everything becomes fine. Too much happened between them. Crow might understand why Edgar did it, but understanding is not the same as forgiveness. And Edgar might have saved Crow, but he still has to live with the fact that he created the monster Crow became. So let me know what you think. Did Edgar make the right decision? Would you have done the same thing if you were trapped inside that chamber? Would you sacrifice your brother's trust to save his life? Or should Edgar have told Crow the truth and allowed them to face Star Park together? Because I already know some of you are going to defend Edgar. And some of you are going to say Crow should never forgive him. So I want to see the arguments in the comments. Just keep it respectful, please. We are discussing two fictional brawlers. Nobody needs to start threatening anybody's family. Also, do you want a part 2? Because there are several ways this story could continue. We could follow Crow and Edgar as they return to the Black Wing and hunt down Dr. Voss. We could discover what the final phase of Project Blood Brother actually means. Maybe Star Park creates a third subject designed specifically to defeat both of them. Or we could find out that Edgar's scarf was never completely destroyed. Maybe a small piece of it survived. Maybe it is still connected to Edgar. Still listening. Still waiting for the right moment to take control again. And what if the scarf was not originally designed for Edgar? What if it belonged to another subject before him? Someone who is still trapped beneath Star Park. Yeah. That could become very interesting. We could also explore what happened during all those years Crow spent underground. Because we skipped over something important. Crow did not just wake up one day knowing how to fight. Someone may have found him in those tunnels. Someone may have taught him how to control the poison. And that person could be connected to another brawler we already know. Maybe Leon? maybe Byron, maybe even Mortis. I already have a few ideas, but I want to know which direction you would prefer. So comment part 2 if you want this story to continue, and tell me which mystery you want next. Tori, do you want the origin of Edgar's living scarf? Or should we investigate Dr. Voss and discover what other brawlers she created inside the Blackwing? Sorry, my throat is actually getting dry after that one. But seriously, thank you for listening all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this darker style of Brawl Stars story, leave a like so I know you want more episodes like this. Subscribe if you have not already, because the next story could be even darker. And remember, Crow and Edgar may have escaped Star Park together, but Project Blood Brother is still active. Dr. Voss is still watching, and somewhere beneath the park, another cage may already be opening. I'll catch you in the next video.